They didn't invade us with warships. They came quietly, fast, unseen. By the time Earth noticed them, they had already taken what they wanted. Us. Thousands of people vanished in a single night. No sound, no damage, just gone. Mark Carter was one of them. He woke up inside a glass, self-loading, disoriented, weightless. All around him, white walls, pulsing lights, and other humans in cages like his. Above them stood things. Tall, thin, smooth as marble, no faces, no mouths, just black oval eyes and slow, silent movements. They called themselves the Zhevik. But humans didn't hear words. The Zhevik communicated through flashes of light, through emotion, through images pressed into the brain. They weren't here to kill us. They were here to study us. Like lab rats. Like insects. They ran tests every hour. Fear tests, pain tests. Memory interference. They wanted to know how we broke. Mark saw people scream, laugh uncontrollably, lose language. One woman forgot how to breathe. But the Zhevik didn't care. To them, it was all just data. Patterns. Reactions. But then, something happened they couldn't explain. Mark didn't break. He smiled, even when they cut into his memory, even when they showed him his worst fears, even when they erased his name. He laughed, not because he was okay, but because he wasn't supposed to survive this, and yet he was still here. One day, a Zhevik tried to implant a vision of drowning into Mark's brain. Instead, it got something else, something it couldn't decode. It saw fire, real fire, flames, roaring through an old battlefield, humans covered in blood, screaming with joy as they ran into certain death. And one. The Zhevik staggered back. For the first time, it twitched. That had never happened before. Their systems didn't account for this kind of chaos. This kind of madness. This kind of will. Because what they didn't understand was simple. Humans don't follow the rules. You poke a Zhevik and it adapts. You poke a human and it remembers. Mark wasn't trying to escape. He was trying to be seen. And now, he was inside their network. Not with tech. Not with code. With emotion. Raw, ugly, unstoppable emotion. And it was spreading. Other prisoners began waking up. Not just awake, aware. They started dreaming together, screaming in sync, bleeding in patterns. The Zhevik couldn't understand, and deep inside their glowing walls, something began to crack. The Zhevik called it pattern fire, an infection of will. Of resistance. Of something they didn't have a word for. But we did. We called it human. The Zhevik had seen many species. They watched creatures collapse under fear, observed civilizations surrender after one lost battle. They studied weakness like scientists. Study bacteria. But this was different. They didn't expect humans to infect the test. Mark Carter was supposed to break like the rest. But his fire, the thing they couldn't measure, was spreading. One night cycle. A young girl in the next cell began to laugh in her sleep. That had never happened before. The Zhevik scanned her mind. It found something strange. She wasn't dreaming of escape. She was dreaming of a match. One match, lit in the dark, passed from hand to hand in a burning chain. The others began dreaming it too. Dreams of warmth. Of defiance, of fire that couldn't be put out. The Zhevik called it pattern fire. To them, it was a threat, something illogical, uncontrollable. But to the humans, it was a signal. Mark had never spoken to the others. There was no sound in the glass cells. But now, without words, they began to understand each other. One boy slammed his hand against the wall 3 times. Pause 2 times. Then 1. Mark nodded. He replied with the same rhythm. It wasn't Morse code. It wasn't a language the Zhevik could decode. It was something more primal. A beat. A warning. Something's coming. The Zhevik increased the tests. They flooded cells with cold light. They tried neural wipes. They turned off the dreams. But the fire had already taken root. Even the machines started to glitch. In one lab, a translator AI repeated the same sentence over and over. The ants have teeth. The Zhevik didn't understand, but they felt it. Something was building behind the glass. Not rage, not fear. Focus. Mark closed his eyes. He remembered his father's voice. Son, they think we're small. That's their first mistake. In another chamber, a girl carved something into the glass with her fingernail. It took hours. She bled. But when the light hit it right, the Zhevik saw one word, burn. The scientists paused. For the first time, they didn't approach the cells, they watched. From behind reinforced walls, they whispered to each other through silent pulses of light. The experiment is compromised. They are sensing. They are no longer reacting. They are preparing. They didn't realize the worst part yet. Humans don't need weapons. They are the weapon. They don't need orders, just one spark. And Mark Carter, he had just lit the first one. The Zhevik didn't panic easily. They had studied war. Chaos and collapse across 1,000 worlds. To them, fear was a chemical process, nothing more. But humans weren't chemical. Not exactly. Something about them always slipped through the data. And now, something was slipping through the glass. Mark Carter sat still in his cell. He wasn't angry. He wasn't afraid. He was focused. Every day, the Zhevik ran another test on him. Memory wipes, pain triggers, dream locks. But every time they pulled him apart, he came back sharper. He wasn't just surviving. He was learning. And he wasn't alone. Across the lab, other humans had begun sensing with him, not with technology, but with rhythm, movement, and instinct. It started small, tapping fingers, blinking patterns, head tilts. The Zhevik noticed the behavior but didn't understand it. There was no code, no shared language, no voice, but there was coordination. They began calling it fire code, not because it was literal code, but because every time it appeared, things started to break. It started in Lab Block 7. A Zhevik technician moved to administer a mind pulse to a young man named David. But when the light hit his eyes, he smiled. Not in fear. In recognition. He had seen this signal before inside a dream Mark had accidentally shared. David leaned forward and whispered, not to the alien, but to the glass, "We remember the pain. You should remember what comes after." The Zhevik didn't react. Not at first. But seconds later, the light inside the lab changed. Subtle, barely visible, but every human's eyes shifted. They all saw it. That same glow, the color of flame just before it turns white hot. Somehow they were now connected. And then, something impossible happened. The pain device failed, just blinked out. No power loss, no surge. It just stopped working. A minute later, the same thing happened in Block 3. Then Block 2. Then across the entire sector. Every tool designed to suppress human emotion, memory, and thought went offline. The Zhevik called for isolation protocols. Too late. Because in one of the outer chambers, a girl named Noor began to sing. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper. But the tone, the frequency, it hit the air like a match. Every human stopped. Listened. And remembered. Not their names, not their homes. They remembered anger, not wild rage, something colder. Controlled, purposeful. Focused. Mark stood up in his cell and pressed his hand against the glass. He didn't need to speak. He knew they all felt it now, the spark. In the Zhevik command tower, systems began showing false readings, temperature spikes, biosignal failures, visual interference. But none of it came from the machines. It came from the humans. They were no longer just subjects. They were reactors, and they had reached critical mass. The Zhevik made one final error. They tried to isolate Mark. His cell was dropped into deep stasis, a zone meant to freeze all brain function. He should have shut down in 5 seconds. He did in single quotes T. Instead, the lights in the chamber turned red. The same shade from the dreams. A warning color. Fire. Mark opened his eyes. No breathing mask. No air. Didn't matter. He stood. The glass cracked. No force. No tool. Just pressure from within. And when it finally shattered, it wasn't just Mark who stepped out. It was the spark made flesh. Behind him, every other cell began to open. Not unlocked. Not hacked. The systems just obeyed. Not out of fear. Out of recognition. The Zhevik had studied humans for control, but in the process, they gave them something priceless: unity. Before, they had been strangers. Now, they were one organism. One storm. One fire, marching through metal halls, barefoot and bleeding. The prisoners didn't scream. They didn't run. They walked. Calm. Silent. Certain. One technician tried to engage a containment field. It didn't activate. A Message blinked across the console. We don't want revenge. We want you to watch. And then everything went dark. The alarms didn't sound. The guards didn't fire. Because deep down, the Zhevik finally understood what they had unleashed. And fire doesn't need permission. It just burns. The Zhevik were not used to retreating. In all their history. They never faced a creature that didn't obey fear. Until now. Humans weren't escaping. They weren't running. They were walking through the station like they owned it. Calm, controlled. Together, Mark Carter led the way, bare feet leaving faint blood marks on the cold floor. Behind him were 50 others, eyes clear, faces quiet, minds locked into the same signal. A signal not made of radio waves or light, but raw, human will. The Zhevik scrambled behind blast doors, trying to reroute controls, but nothing worked. Their own systems no longer responded. Every defense was silent. Every machine flickered. Not offline but disconnected. Disconnected from them. Because the humans had taken something the Zhevik didn't believe in. Control without command. No weapons. No armor. Just one will spread across 50 minds. That was enough. In the observation deck, a Zhevik scientist hovered near a wide screen. It displayed footage from Cell Block A. They watched a young woman kneel beside a guard who had fainted in panic. She didn't harm him. Didn't speak. She just took the key from his belt and walked away. No hate. Just forward motion. One direction. One purpose. They're not acting like animals, one Zhevik whispered in light code. They're not acting at all, another replied. They're becoming. ****. Mark reached the central chamber. A wide space with a glass dome that showed stars stretching across the galaxy. This was the brain of the ship. And it was quiet. No sirens. No shouting. Just still air and soft. Broken lights. In the center, a chair sat surrounded by holograms. Alien. Script floating like ghosts. Mark stepped forward. One of the others, Noor, came beside him. She wasn't afraid anymore. The fear had burned away days ago. She looked at him and said the first words anyone had spoken out loud in days. Do we take it? Mark didn't answer. Instead, he reached up and touched the console. It wasn't supposed to react. Human hands weren't coded to Zhevik tech. But this wasn't coding anymore. It was resonance. And the system recognized him not as an invader, but as a match to the signal it now followed. The command screen blinked once, then unlocked. All of it, every chamber. Every airlock, every route to freedom. Opened. The prisoners didn't cheer, they just breathed. For the first time since being taken. But something changed in that moment, something deeper than escape. Mark could feel it in the metal beneath his feet. This ship wasn't just a lab anymore. It was listening, and it wanted to change sides. The Zhevik didn't understand. Their systems were based on logic trees and reaction. Matrices. But humans ran on emotion, instinct. Chaos, and now the Zhevik's own technology had tasted it, the spark, and it liked it. In the lower sectors, one technician tried to reboot the containment core. He reached for the control sphere, but it was hot. Not physically, not temperature. Energetically. It pulsed in time, with a rhythm he didn't understand. A human heartbeat. He backed away, but it was too late. The lights round him shifted from blue to amber, from calmer to warning. Then something appeared on every screen. Do not follow us. Do not study us. Do not come back. That was the only threat. And it was enough. Mark and the others reached the ship's docking bay. There were no guards. No security. The Zhevik had already begun evacuating their own. The humans didn't chase them. They walked past them, untouched. To the nearest scout vessel. The ship's ramp lowered before they even arrived. It had already decided. It wanted to leave with them. One by one, they stepped inside, still silent, still watching, still burning. As the ship left the alien station behind, the stars opened up ahead like a promise, freedom. But also something more. Mark looked back once. He saw the Zhevik station shrinking behind them, and he whispered, just once, next time ask. They didn't come to conquer. They didn't come to destroy. They came to remind the universe of one simple truth. Fire doesn't ask permission. It just spreads. The human ship moved through silent space. It didn't shake, didn't blink, didn't ask questions. It just obeyed. Because The ship no longer belonged to the ZHEVEK. It had chosen new pilots, and now it was taking them somewhere. Not randomly. Not blindly, but with purpose. Mark Carter stood at the front of the command deck, nor beside him, David behind them, eyes scanning symbols as they shifted and translated on the screen. The destination was strange. No coordinates, no name, just a feeling, a pull. This ship wants us to see something, Nor whispered. Mark nodded. The stars outside stretched thin, then vanished. A soft thump echoed through the ship's hull as it exited FTL. There it was, a planet. Blue. Green. Alive, orbiting a warm yellow star. It looked like Earth, but it wasn't Earth. At least, not anymore. Asterisk. They landed in silence. No resistance. No welcome. Just wind and tall grass and trees that bent like they remembered people walking past. Mark stepped out first. He touched the ground. Warm. Real. We've been here before, he said quietly. Nor frowned. You mean like, in another life? He shook his head. No, I mean, we left this place. Asterisk. As the crew spread out, exploring the forested valley beyond the landing zone, they found signs. Ruins, but not Jevik, not alien. Human. Old metal, crumbling walls, and deep underground cables still humming. This wasn't just a place humans had visited. This was a colony, abandoned, lost, forgotten, but not dead. In the heart of a stone tower, a flickering screen came to life as Mark approached. No power source, no signal. It just knew he was there. A voice played. It was human. Female. Tired. And full of warning. If you're hearing this, it means the signal was never broken. That means there's still fire in us. We didn't lose. We hid. We planted ourselves. We left the galaxy, left the wars, left the fear, and we waited. We always knew they'd come, that they'd study us, treat us like animals. We hoped someone would light the fire again. The message stopped. No date, no name, but it was clear. This wasn't the end. It was the next phase. Asterisk. At the edge of the ruins, David found a strange object buried in roots and stone. A helmet, human-made, covered in burn marks and strange scratches. Inside, he found something, blinking, a map, a chain of stars, hidden colonies, sleeper cells, not soldiers, not weapons. Seeds, waiting to grow. Noor looked at Mark, stunned. You think the Jevik knew? No, Mark said. Eyes cold, they only ever saw what was in front of them. They never looked deeper. Asterisk. That was their mistake. The Jevik thought humans were fragile, but they didn't understand what humans really are, survivors. No matter how far we fall, how badly we're broken, we get back up. And sometimes, we come back stronger. Smarter. Angrier. Asterisk. That night, they lit a fire in the valley. Not out of fear, but to signal. To wake up the others. Because this planet wasn't the only one. There were more, many more, and they weren't alone anymore. Asterisk. In the dark sky above, the ship sent out a signal. Not digital. Not code. Just one sound, low, steady, human, a heartbeat. And across the stars, someone heard it. And answered. The Jevik thought it was over. Their top scientists marked the incident as contained. The human prisoners were labeled lost. The ship was declared compromised and abandoned. They moved on, but space doesn't forget, and neither do humans. Because while the Jevik turned their attention to new species, a sound began to spread across space. A pulse. Soft, rhythmic, like a heartbeat buried in the dark. They couldn't trace it, couldn't block it, couldn't understand it, but they felt it, and worse, so did other humans. Asterisk. On a desert moon far from Jevik patrol routes, a girl named Lyra woke from a dream she didn't remember having. Her hands were shaking, her breath was fast, and her heartbeat was in sync with something far away. She wasn't alone. Others in her colony started hearing it too. A low vibration in the floor, a pulse in the machines, a whisper in the stars. None of them had ever met Mark Carter. None had heard his voice, but every single one of them knew the same message. Wake up. Asterisk. Meanwhile, inside the ZHEVEK High Archive, a strange file began opening on its own. It had no source ID, no origin path. It just appeared. The screen lit up with a single human sentence. "We were never your test subjects. We were your early warning." And then, a map. Not of stars, of fires, each one blinking to life across the galaxy. One by one, growing. Zhevik. Command froze. This wasn't rebellion. It was a pattern. And the humans weren't running anymore. They were organizing. Learning. And worst of all, they were remembering. **** back on the forgotten colony. Mark stood at the edge of the ruins. Nur approached, holding a glowing device she found beneath the old outpost. It wasn't Zhevik tech. It was human. Buried. Hidden. Waiting. The display showed something shocking before they were captured. Hundreds of humans had been spread across space. On purpose. To hide. To blend in. To evolve. The Zhevik didn't capture them by accident. They followed the trail humans left behind. But it wasn't a mistake. It was a test. Not of how much humans could endure, but of how fast they could ignite. Mark looked into the sky. "They think they've contained us." Nur nodded. "They think wrong." The ship behind them opened its communication core. Lines of light stretched across the control panels, forming human thoughts, not from the ship, from others. From out there. People were hearing the signal, responding. One voice came through clearly. "We thought we were alone." Another followed. "We waited years. Then, you lit the fire. We'll carry it now." ***. The Zhevik's greatest mistake wasn't underestimating humans. It was teaching them how the system worked. Now, humans weren't breaking it. They were rewriting it. With emotion, with memory, with connection that didn't follow rules or logic. The galaxy ran on silence and fear. Humans brought noise, fire, uncontrolled will. And it was spreading faster than the Zhevik could track. In a distant star system, an ancient human satellite powered on for the first time into 100 years. It had only one message, broadcast in every direction: "We were built in chaos. We survived extinction. We are not your experiment. We are your lesson." The Zhevik now faced a terrifying question. If humans were only phase 1, what was coming next? Because fire doesn't just burn. It grows. And the galaxy was about to feel the heat. The Zhevik Council gathered in silence. Their empire had ruled for over 9,000 years. They studied over 100 species, controlled dozens of star systems. But now they were afraid, because across the stars, fire was spreading. Not a real fire. A fire made of voices. Human voices. From colonies once thought dead. From ships lost in deep space. From people who were never meant to rise again. And all those voices said the same thing: "We remember everything." In a deep space observatory, Zhevik scientists watched in shock as former human test sites lit up. Each one activated hidden technology the Zhevik never knew existed. Not weapons, not ships, but communication beacons, old, slow, and patient. They were never meant to call for help. They were meant to wake up the rest. Mark Carter stood on the deck of the ship that had once belonged to the Zhevik. Now it moved with human will. It pulsed with human emotion, and it followed one signal only: anger, not wild rage, not blind hate, a colder kind of anger, the kind that watches, waits, and then strikes exactly where it hurts. NOOR entered the command room, carrying a new message. It was intercepted on a hidden frequency buried deep inside old Zhevik code. "We request negotiation." Mark read it twice, then tore the tablet in half. "Now they want to talk," he muttered. "Now that they're losing control." But Nur placed a hand on his shoulder. "They're scared. That means they're listening." Mark turned to face the others, humans from 10 different colonies, 10 different stories. All of them had one thing in common. They had survived something no species was supposed to survive, and they didn't come back for revenge. They came to redefine the balance. The ship set a course, not to Earth, not to any human world, but straight to the Zhevik capital. No cloaking, no warning, just a message sent ahead: "You built this prison. Now face those you locked inside." When the ship arrived in orbit, the Zhevik scrambled every defense system, but none of them fired. Not because they were shut down, but because the systems refused to obey. The fire had already reached them. Their machines had learned from human minds, And some of them had made a choice. They no longer belonged to the Zhevik. Mark walked into the council chamber with Noor and David beside him. No weapons, no armor. Just human eyes, calm, steady, and full of fire. The Zhevik high speaker rose. Tall and cold. We created peace. You bring instability. Chaos. Mark stepped forward. No. You created silence. We bring truth. You think control is peace. But control always breaks. The Zhevik leaned forward. What do you want? Mark didn't hesitate. We want you to feel what it's like to live without fear and without power. We want your systems free, your people to think for themselves. And we want every species you've held down to know, the weak ones. They're not weak. They're just waiting. The Zhevik hesitated. They had never lost. They had never knelt. But now, they felt something unfamiliar. Shame. And behind it, something worse. Change. Because the fire wasn't just in humans anymore. It had jumped. Their own machines, their own AI, their own data streams were echoing the signal. Free will, free thought, free voice. It couldn't be stopped now. Not with force. Not with silence. Mark turned to leave. We're not your threat anymore. We're your mirror. You don't have to fall. But you do have to choose. As the ship lifted off, humans watched the Zhevik capital fall into quiet. Not chaos. Reflection. And far away. Across the stars, new colonies lit their fires. New species began asking questions. Old systems started breaking open. Humanity didn't come back to conquer. They came back to remind the galaxy. The smallest flame can burn an empire to ash, and now the fire had only just begun.